So everybody's favorite old school, somewhat counterculture antagonist, if you will, bass fisherman, Randy Blaukat, made a video on kayak fishing and the future of kayak fishing tournaments. So of course, I had to watch it. I watch a lot of Randy stuff. I know he's kind of got some controversial takes, but I think it's entertaining, and I love, kind of how simple and to the point he gets on a lot of the stuff he talks about. So I had to watch it. So I wanted to do a reaction video to some of the things he said, give you my opinion on some of the things he said, and then hear your thoughts in the comments as well. So with that said, let's get right into it. Let's hear from Randy on the future of kayak fishing.
Hey gang, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and thank you very much for checking out today's video. Really appreciate it. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about kayak fishing and going to give you guys my opinion of it, sort of talk about the future of it, just sort of have an overall commentary on it. So anyway, guys, let's talk about kayak fishing a little bit. There, there's been a huge resurgence in it as far as the kayak tournaments, overall interest in it. I think there's a lot of different reasons in it. Number one, it's more affordable. It's it's a lot more quiet and peaceful. It's not near as hectic. It allows you to, sort of experience fishing more on the basic level of what fishing is really is. There's a lot of pluses to it, and I really, really like the idea of kayak fishing.
All right. So right off the bat, I agree with what Randy's saying, sorta, but not really with the language he's using. Maybe that was an accident, but he said that resurgence in kayak fishing. I think kayak fishing has been on a straight upward climb for a decade or more, especially the last 5 years through the pandemic and stuff. Kayak fishing is booming. It's the fastest growing segment of bass fishing, especially tournament bass fishing, by far. Uh, Tournament payouts are getting bigger. Tournament fields are getting bigger. More people are getting involved in it. I think it has been that way and on the climb. Now, as far as being a simpler way to fish, it definitely slows you down. You can't cover as much water in a kayak, even with a motor on it, etc. So certainly agree with him on that. Let's hear what else he has to say.
I tend to think that kayak fishing is probably going to be the most fastest growing fishing genre in the country. Just for the fact that I mentioned before, the affordability fact of it, the fact that you can fish so many different types of bodies of water. You can fish lakes, you can fish ponds, creeks, whatever. I mean, it's just really, really versatile. And the tournament competition aspect of the kayak fishing is also completely different. There's a tremendous amount of benefits to it. Those guys can launch anywhere they want on the lake. It's a catch and release at the time they catch them. They just measure the fish. It's just peaceful. It's quiet and peaceful on there. So from that.
So yeah, I already said this, and Randy's kind of saying it here. It's not gonna be the fastest growing. It already is the fastest growing, and I think it shows no signs of slowing down. We'll probably see new orgs get involved in kayak fishing tournaments. There'll be completely new organizations pop up and be created. The local kayak fishing scene is getting bigger and bigger. So yeah, and what he said about barrier to entry is absolutely true. To get from the bank to the water, get off the bank and get on the water. There's no better way to do it than in a kayak. And he mentioned you can't do earlier. You mentioned you can't do both bass fishing, bass boat fishing, and kayak fishing. And there's some people that do, but how many stories have y'all heard of people that own a bass boat that also has picked up a kayak and now the bass boat has collected dust for a year or more, or even if they take it out, it's not very often.
One of the concerns I do have about kayak fishing, though, and then I want to sort of give maybe you guys some tips on it a little bit. One of the concerns that I have about it is the fact that I see that these kayaks anymore morphing into these high tech machines that get away from like what the basic foundational principle of fishing out of a kayak is.
Okay, there's the Randy Block we all know and love. Uh, I can see he's going to start in on the technology end of things and yeah, keeping it simple. So let's see what he has to say about all that.
Anymore, you got super powerful. Some got electric motors. Some of them's got I don't know if they use gas on it, but some of those I've seen some of those kayaks. It's almost like they get up on plane with the thing. Some guys use like 10 rods in them. They got high tech trolling motors. There's guys that have live scope on them. I've seen several kayaks that have three electronic units on it. And by the time you get it all decked out with this technology, they cost about what a regular bass boat would be. So personally, I would like to see more limitations on the equipment as far as the way kayaks could be rigged out, especially the electronic technology part of it. So it's almost like if if you have
There he is. Let's stop the electronics train. That's what Randy's known for over there. If you guys have watched most of his or any of his stuff about live scope, etc. Uh, I'm going to disagree with him on that. I don't think that that part of it's a problem, and 100% it's not true that a fully rigged out kayak will cost what a bass boat costs. Maybe 30 years ago, I mean, in the 90s, you could buy a fully rigged bass boat for 30 grand. The most expensive kayak I've seen retail, and I'm talking about with every bell and whistle on it. I saw it at the Classic Expo. It was close to $25,000, and that was literally as rigged as you could get it. I think it had every kind of anchor wizard and motor, multiple graphs, live scopes, sniper mount, all the things you can imagine putting on a kayak. That thing had it, and it was a little over 20,000, and that is way too expensive for an entry level kayaker. I understand that, but compared to buying a 18-foot fiberglass bass boat with all the stuff on it, you're still talking a fifth of the price, probably, or a fourth of the price.
have these kayak tournaments and there's one person in there that say they don't have much money and they want to compete and all they can afford is basically a kayak with a few rod and reels. It's not really fair to those dudes versus the guys that have live scope and three electronics and you know every bell and whistle possible known to man on these kayaks are sort of a then you have an unlevel playing field financially like you do in regular bass fishing tournaments, which the unlevel financial playing field and the financial discrimination is rampant in the sport. And
Whoa. I disagree there. And the reason I disagree is because there's plenty of precedent in kayak fishing for a guy showing up with no practice, a simple kayak with a paddle only, not even a pedal drive, and a couple of rods, and winning tournaments over every year, the last few years, whether it's the Bassmaster Kayak Series, the Hobie Bass Open Series, or whatever. Somebody in a traditional sit on top kayak with a simple setup has won a tournament, and almost every tournament, somebody like that is in the running to do well or win some money or something. I mean, that's not a problem. I think financial discrimination. I've seen some of his videos on the bass boat side of things and why that could be true, especially for a young, high school, college age person trying to get into professional bass fishing. I don't see how they can afford it either. But that is not a deal in kayak fishing. Our entry fees to tournaments are so low. I mean, even the most expensive one is $295 for the Hobie Bass Open Series. That doesn't even sniff, Bassmaster Opens or anything like that. Not even co-angler entry fees, I don't think, for some of this stuff. So entry fees are low. Point of entry is low. You can get a reasonable kayak and get into kayak tournaments and still have a chance to win, and you're not being discriminated against. I think he used the words financial discrimination. I don't think that's a thing in kayak fishing.
I hate to see it in kayak fishing too. I'll just give you guys a few tips. I mean, as far if you're a kayak angler, to me the biggest positive and the thing that you need to take advantage of more than anything if you're in a kayak is the accessibility that you have to areas that other people can't reach. Getting into hard areas, extremely shallow areas in the extremities of the upper arms of creeks and rivers. One of the things that I would do if I was a kayak competitor is I would get on Google Earth and I would search out those areas, especially since you guys can launch. I think it's you guys have to have like a public ramp to put in. I'm not positive on that, but I would search out those areas that simply don't get the fishing pressure. You think about it, is if you do a little bit of research on that, you can access and you could fish water almost any lake in the country that a regular bass boat can't get to, and that's this huge advantage that you should take advantage of in a kayak. And
All right. So yeah, I agree. This was a big argument over the last year or so, especially in the kayak tournament world, or only in the kayak tournament world. There's a huge difference between kayak fishing, just to go kayak fishing, and tournament kayak fishing, obviously. And some of the rules were changed on where you can launch. Public access changed to define launches rather than hard boundaries or defined boundaries. It went to defined launches. And I think that's a good thing. And the reason for that is because people, when you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And when you say launch from anywhere that's public and they're 20, 30 miles off the main body of water or whatever the case may be, now if you're talking about tournament kayak fishing and we're all supposed to sort of be fishing on the same body of water, or at least start there, it caused a big uproar on the kayak tournament side of things. So in theory, what Randy's saying is true. In practice, just like human beings do, they kind of mess everything up. So on the tournament end of things, we're not going back to that. that's not happening. But from a recreational standpoint, absolutely. Get that kayak and get where the other people can't. Have those fish all to yourself.
And obviously, the stealth approach is a given on something like that. But anyway, overall, guys, I really like the idea of kayak fishing. I think one of the things that probably is going to hold it back to some extent is that some people enjoy fishing with other people. Obviously, if you're in a kayak, you can't really do that. It offers the ability to slow the growth and technology down a little bit if it's done right. So
So yeah, I sort of agree with them on that, but not the most people prefer to fish alone, and you can't do that in a kayak. I think that's actually the opposite. I think the idea of kayak fishing is you can fish together. A lot of people do fish together. They have their fishing buddies or fishing groups, but you're the captain of your own ship, so to speak. Whereas if you want to split up and go fish alone for a little bit and come back, you have that option, and you can have that solitude and that community group fishing buddies or whatever group of fishing buddies on the within the same day, within the same hour. You're not stuck in the boat with them the whole time. You can't get front boated, although they can, I guess, cut you off down the bank. But you're the captain of your own vessel there, but you can also fish with buddies or go on river trips or whatever in your kayak. So I really don't agree with that. But as far as slowing down the growth of technology and things like that, kayak anglers really use the same rods, the same reels, the same baits, the same electronics. The only thing they don't have is powerful motors where they can cover as much water. Obviously, even the fastest kayak is slow relatively, right? So in that respect, it's going to slow people down and teach them to be more patient fishermen for sure, because you can't just burn a 250 all over the lake and run points or spot to spot to spot. So definitely on that end. But kayak anglers, they're not going to slow down within our sport the growth of all the other stuff, all the electronics and rods, reels, and whatever else.
it's more popular now than it ever is. I really don't see any reason at this point why it's going to lose popularity. And from an environmental standpoint, it's much more environmentally friendly. It's just there's a huge amount of positives to it. So overall, I like it. I love the idea of kayaks. I may just go. I may become just a pure kayak fisherman at one point in my life too. I mean, I can see myself going in that direction at one point because I really like the overall concept.
There we go. I think Randy Blaukat would make a heck of a kayak fisherman. And side note, he lives relatively close to where I live, just up like an hour and a half up the road, I think. So if Randy somehow stumbles across my obscure channel and sees this video, hit me up and I'll bring a kayak up there and we'll go kayak fishing. You can get a taste. Maybe even come down and fish one of our tournaments on Beaver Lake or something. But yeah, I agree with Randy. The sport's not slowing down. It's going to keep growing. I think overall it was a great video that he did. I think it's cool that someone with a large following and a following of a lot of different ages, but I'm sure a lot of old school anglers follow him. And there's a little bit of a look down your nose from some of the old school anglers at the kayak anglers, like, less than or get out of my way. And maybe he'll open their eyes to some of that. So I think it's cool that he did this video, shed a little light on kayak fishing, put a little more eyes on kayak fishing. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you think. Do you think Randy would make a great kayak angler? It'd be awesome to see him get out there in one. What do you think of his thoughts on it? My thoughts on some of his ideas there. As always, I appreciate y'all watching.